Well, thank you everyone for coming. We'll continue to let people in as we go. For the most part, please keep yourselves muted. Make sure your phones are on silent, as we say at readings, even though it doesn't really matter in this context, but still, keep your phones on silent. You're here for poetry. We will have some question and answer time towards the end, so you can unmute yourself then. Remember, you're muted, but enough of that. Welcome. I'm Matt Mason. I'm Executive Director of the Nebraska Writers Collective, and with the help of Humanities Nebraska, which is a fantastic nonprofit in Nebraska that helps us bring people in. Adam was supposed to be here in person doing some school visits and workshops and readings, but we're doing it this way because we can't do it the other way. So we're happy to have Adam here in any way we can. For those who don't know, Adam Stone is a Cambridge, Massachusetts poet, organizer, gadabout, all kinds of things. He has books of his own poetry. He has anthologies of Cantab poetry. What I love about Adam really is he's so community minded in helping other poets, gathering their work, putting together YouTube channels of just Cantab history and all kinds of things. He's represented various teams at the National Poetry Slam. He's been at the individual World Poetry Slam Championships. He's pretty much kind of done it all. So if you have questions about any of this, about publishing, about community work in gathering other poets, save that for the end. And in the meantime, let's hear some poetry and more about Adam. So, Adam.
Thank you, Matt. I'm not going to do a lot of chatting between poems, so I'm going to start right off with a poem and make sure I hit my timer so I don't go over time. 20 questions I desperately want answered. How are you today? Have you accepted the same personal savior as the person who knocked on your door this weekend while you were trying to find a pornography that excited you without seeming to exploit the type of person you're attracted to? Because how could you be turned on by the objectification of your ideal partner? Are you some kind of pervert for finding joy in the failure of people who you've always believed were mean to you for no reason? Your first or second or seventh grade teacher asked you to write a mission statement about who you were and what you intended to become. And you maybe said something like astronaut or doctor or fourth chair violinist in a chamber orchestra that plays at charity events you could never afford to attend as a guest. Do you remember if you really meant whatever it was you wrote down, or whether you were just saying whatever you could think of that would get someone to let you sit at their lunch table without rolling their eyes at you? Why do we constantly seek to segregate ourselves from our friends by the color of our beliefs and the intentions of our gender until we are a frozen landscape that future scientists would love to study but are unlikely to build homes near? Are you okay? A face in motion tends to stay in motion, talking at people who are maybe not so terribly interested in what that face is saying, but a face at rest is so easily misunderstood because it's hard to constantly focus on seeming happy without the type of medication that is currently melting the liver of the constantly smiling man in the frozen food section who is worried about the scowl that you don't even realize you were wearing in December. And scowls in December are like white pants after Labor Day, so why don't you just smile? It makes you seem more approachable. Why do we talk about the pressure to perform as though our body was filled with the potential for success that is constantly trying to escape us? As if an A+ on a final exam was inflating like a tumor behind our carbonated eyes, or that the proper grip of a handshake at the first job interview since your parents stopped paying your phone bill might crush the hands of the creepy middle manager in the one-bedroom apartment, who's just as worried about how he's going to both eat and afford his subway card this month as you are. Why do we associate any of these things with the word pressure? A person cuts you in line at the pharmacy while they are talking on their cell phone about the final episode of a TV show you have just finally surrendered to watching, and now you know that the character you hate is going to die in the end. And it would have been so much more satisfying to have experienced his death as a surprise, as though he could have been immortal. But now you know that that character, like most of the people you love, is going to die before you do. And you had to hear it from some sharp-laughed hyena who neither understands the definition of the word spoiler nor how a line works in a public space. And it just makes you want to explode and remind you that your doctor mentioned something about your blood pressure and what kind of God or science would fill our bodies with such a volatile substance. Do you believe in a higher power? Do you believe in a lower power? What if the power is at the same level of you? Does power make a god? What if reincarnation is real and we're living precisely the life we wanted in our previous life, except we were maybe just as lazy in that life and forgot to fill in some important details, and every blank page we left has been lined with misery? Is that better or worse than if this is precisely the life we thought we deserved? Why do we ask questions like, what kind of music do you like? When we know that music is more than just a series of categories that radio station owners of the 20th century slapped on sounds so that they could market them to a variety of people who never learned to think for themselves and who think baby is an acceptable word to put in a song about love to disguise the fact that the singer is terrified that you'll find out that they're gay or straight or a gerontophile or whatever it is that they're into that might cause the listener to realize that the singer will never love them, or worse, that their experience, while similar, isn't precisely the same as the singer's, and who could be bothered to be listened to listen to music that isn't written specifically to appeal to them as an individual consumer of stories? What is the mean temperature of fear? Why are mean and average nearly synonymous? When I make a joke at the expense of someone I love because I feel they've known me long enough to be certain I'm kidding, am I ignoring their feelings for themselves or acknowledging their feelings for me? Is there a difference? So most of the poems that I'll be doing tonight are from my latest long form book called The End of Lucidity. It's a series of poems written between 2012 and 2018, including a live blog of the 2016 election in poetry form that I will not be reading any of tonight. But I will be reading a couple of things from outside of that, including this is a poem that hasn't appeared anywhere yet. There's a poet out in Northampton called Catherine Weiss, who writes a bunch of form poetry and invented a poem that's called a Rex. And their description of the form is as follows. The first stanza is a factoid from history or science. The second stanza is personal commentary on the factoid. The third stanza is a digression. The fourth stanza is a reckoning with the topic. And the fifth stanza is a repetition of stanza number 2 with new meaning and context. This is from a project I've been working on since August. Once I get it printed, all proceeds will go to teachers who are also poets. The book is called I Just Want Every Teacher to Live, and this is the first poem from it, called Appreciation. The shadow blister effect is a visual phenomenon in which a shadow bulges as it approaches another shadow, and it takes place when two objects are at different distances from the light source. The object nearest the light source begins blocking the light from the more distant object so that it appears to reach out and pull the other object's shadow into it. Mrs. Taylor taught every aspect of school to our kindergarten class: reading, math, art, music, gym, story time, recess, everything. I remember only 3 things about her besides her appearance. She owned a player piano that she used when hosting sing-along field trips to her house. She hastily built a platform out of chair legs and wooden pallets the day roaches invaded our school during morning session. And once a week during nap time, she would select one child to pose for a silhouette drawing, where she would shine a light on your profile and trace the shadow. She would hold on to it for a week, adding details from memory: your eyes, your smile, the shadow of your sundial nose. The further from the moment she turned the light off, the more your silhouette resembled your face. "What do you say?" she asked after she turned off the light. "It looks good," I reply. "No." "What do you say?" I'm staring at the light bulb as it grows dark. "I like it." She sighs. "Close. Thank you." I smile. You're welcome. She stares at my face. Thank you. I smile. You're welcome? She sighs. Thank you. I smile. Thank you? She smiles. You're welcome. Thank you became a mantra to every teacher, every friend, every relative. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Taylor says I should say thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Taylor. I am a player piano of appreciation. Don't ever again want to feel like I haven't shown proper thank you. Tell me, how can I thank someone properly? Everyone does so much for me, even when I don't know how to ask. Thank you. Thank you, every Mrs. Taylor, for trying to make me look more like I felt inside when I was still a child, for being patient with my bewilderment at what people wanted from me, when all I wanted was everyone to be happy with me. Thank you. Mrs. Taylor taught every aspect of school to our kindergarten class: reading, math, art, music, gym, story time, recess, everything. Once a week, during nap time, she would select one child to pose for silhouette drawing, where she would shine a light on your profile and trace the shadow. She would hold on to it for a week, adding details from memories: your eyes, your smile, the shadow of your sundial nose. The further from the moment she turned the light off, the more the silhouette resembled your face. All right, another one from the book. There was a Twitter meme that went around several years ago, and I was stealing ideas from Twitter, and this is one of them. It's called hashtag first 7 jobs. 1, neighborhood paperboy for the Cape Cod Times. To save up money to buy comics, I searched for the fastest routes from my house to the newer and bigger houses in our neighborhood. I got faster, found new shortcuts when my parents diverted my funds so I could buy my first dirt bike. When you get a job, it's best to spend a portion of your money making yourself efficient enough not to lose your job. I still dream of those paths, even though they're gone now. My neighborhood devolved to condos and summer homes. 2, muscle shucker for Canterbury Seafoods. Bleeding hands, ripped t-shirts stained with ocean salt, not tears, never tears, the literal ocean. Say, I work, not caddy for daddy's golf buddies. I'm not tanned from worshiping lifeguards at the beach. I work with my hands. I kill living things someone else stole from the ocean. I scrub sand from them. I rinse them so that those people, I mean, sure, you and your family and me and my family too, but mostly those people can eat like they would farm the ocean, like they have ever had to hold their breath longer than was comfortable in order to survive. Those people who summer in our lives, I do this so they can eat like they are us. 3, counselor at a lakefront YMCA day camp. Oh, those people didn't send their kids to my camp. They golf camp, they speedboat on private lakes, they so bored at home while the children of bleeding hands and when is mom coming home come to me. 1-hour bus rides, morning flagpole ceremony, archery when enrollment is up, freeze tag when it isn't, swimming lessons, canoes, duct taped with fleas. One more summer. I was 17. I loved those kids like I knew what I was doing, and they loved me like I would ever learn what I was doing. 4, delivery assistant for Cape Cod Ice. I slept in an air-conditioned truck on the weekends, hopping out at restaurants and grocery stores, heaving hundreds of pounds of ice onto dollies, navigating them down hills. Everyone thinks Cape Cod is all those people, twirling ice in their scotch and sodas while their kids do hallucinogens on their careless parents' golf courses. All the kids I was egotistical enough to think I was helping still hang out on Main Street, 30 screwed, full of resentment and opiates, betting on who will be on which side of the ground at the next funeral. 5, food prep in a dining hall. Because my parents got promotions. My grandparents retired. Because I was the only grandchild on either side of the family, I got out early. Learned how to prepare more food for those people. This time I didn't eat my own meals in the kitchen. I sat at the table with the rest of us people. 6, teacher's aide at Northfield Middle School. Finally, the rich kids look up to me too. 7, lifeguard for a pool in a condo complex. From where I sat, it grew easier and easier to imagine nobody in the world was ever in danger of drowning. I've also, I tend to write poems for, not for slam, but like roughly slam length for a long time, 3 minutes. So part of this book is a series of short poems that I wrote for a 24-hour poems in 24-hour project called Bad at Notes. And this is one of those poems. It's called Its Sister Schadenfreude, which I should easily have memorized. It's 2 lines. The server at your favorite restaurant dropped the future into your lap and realized it would look awkward if they tried to wipe it off you. So you're going to wear it forever. A similar project that I worked on was answering Yahoo questions with poems, particularly ones that were ridiculous in ways that were not offensive or like controversial, just like, huh, okay. So this is the answer to the question, can box turtles eat potato chips? The graphic designer came back as a box turtle, which is not a dig on all the deadlines he missed, but speak to his design aesthetic. His name is Walter now. It was Walter then. Reincarnation only changes your name if you die regretting who you used to be. Walter lives in the garden that I let die when I moved in. Dandelions in the tomatoes, grass growing at different speeds. Walter still loves strange dogs, and they are just as perplexed at his turtleness as they were at his humanity. I wonder if I'll come back as a parrot. Cheap mimic in bright clothes that seem less fitting as I age and age and age into a lifespan that science finds reasonable, but people who know me best will be surprised at. Karaokeing the emotions of people who lived nearest to me. He's so temperamental, they'll still say, as I cock my head in an angle, literally parroting, I love you, I love you, and nipping at their fingers. Someone who falsely thinks they know me, will say, oh, wouldn't you come back as a lovebird since love poems are mostly what you write about? They will come back as a potato and not even be made into French fries the next time they die. Walter eats potato chips that someone scattered in the yard, the generic corpses of those who died forgettably. I've stopped imagining how I will die, even in moments when death seems to be leaning in uncomfortably close for a kiss. Instead, I imagine what's happened to those who've already died, even people like Walter, who I was never close to in life, but who, now dead, won't leave me alone. I'm gonna skip one since I'm a little behind where I wanted to be here. It's fine, it was an old poem anyways. And this is a new one that is not in a book yet. It is one of the poems that I wrote after the coma, about the coma. I wrote a whole manuscript and most of it will never see the light of day because I don't like it. But I like this one. It's called Rings Made of Circular Logic Made Out of Rings. The little backstory of this is I had Legionnaire's disease at the beginning of 2019. I very slowly stopped being aware of my surroundings. I was on vacation with friends. They called my mom, who lived nearby, who took me to a hospital, which I sort of remember. And then I woke up during the world's most boring Super Bowl, like a couple of weeks later. And after a couple of weeks in the hospital, I then had to live with my mom for a month, which is not a dig on my mom, but she lived in an elderly neighborhood in Florida, which was not really where I wanted to be. So this is a poem about that. Again, it's called Rings Made of Circular Logic Made Out of Rings. The neighbors killed my mother's tree by pruning what they perceived shadowed their lawn. Every yard in this purgatorial waiting room, slight variation of one tree, weakly cut grass, a ring of rocks or stones. I cannot tell which. The internet tells me that rocks are large and made of stones, and stones are small and made of rocks, and pebbles are rocks made of stones, made of pebbles, and this is how I am coming back to language. The neighbor's grass is lovely this month, just like everyone else's. My mother calls the neighbor's dog ugly as it craps on her yard, a barb wasted on an ear that has no common tongue. A rock is pelted, a stone skips. You rock someone to sleep, stone a person to death, yet stoned people are sleepy and a death can rock you. Geologists have more words and ideas about language and death, but if there are any geologists in this neighborhood, they too are trapped in a house wishing they were sand in a windstorm, not sand in an hourglass, not sand between treads of ugly white sneakers. One tree in a yard creates no wind, I think. So hurricane season skips this part of the buffet? Now, that's not how weather works. There are no meteorologists in this neighborhood either. Storms are large but not made of wind, and wind is infinite and not made of storm. Yes, I'm feeling better, thank you. So lucky to have a mother, a hospital, doctors. I blink when Jesus is hiccuped. No, I don't remember. Yes, it is hot here. I take a mile-long walk every day. I still don't know where I'm going. All I can think of is not being able to remember the 3 weeks of breath-hitching storm. I don't know precisely what I want to talk about. I don't have the language for me, just of me. I am large and made of another word for me. I am pruned language shadowing my own mouth. Today I walked lost for nearly 5 identical miles, all uphill, a ring of language that somehow brings me back to small talk. I'm storm. Thank you. I am lucky my mother is sand. The last month is pebbles. Thank you. Thank you. My mile-long walk is infinite. I am told it will bring me to the next place I complain about. One complaint in a mouth does not make home, I think. But my small talk looks infinite today, just like everyone else's. I think the ring of my thinking is the shadow of dementia, slight variation of phrasing, near identical imagery neighboring the wind of my future language. I prune my walk until I stop having to think about what part of me is shadowing my mother's neighbor's ears. I would rather my language die by my own hands than by echoes I cannot tell apart. Not all of my poems are first person tales of myself. I do some persona work, and this is a poem. I started writing a bunch of poems in the voice of my imaginary friend from when I was a kid. I actually have no memory of my imaginary friend, but my mom has never let it go. And she will often ask me how Bargo is doing. So this is a poem about growing up with Bargo, who is not real. And it's a 2-part poem called That's So Raisins. Raisins not being my favorite food. Take a sip here. Why does my house burning down have to mean something tragic? You asked Miss Ryland during our weekly creative writing workshop. Maybe I never liked my house. Maybe my mother never brought me the type of cookies I like, so I burned it down my damn self. How is that not tragic? Miss Ryland asks. Everything you've ever loved is burned away because your mother couldn't afford some oatmeal raisin cookies? Oatmeal raisin? Knocking your own folder to the floor. Oatmeal raisin? Oatmeal raisins aren't cookies. They're a delicious mud of sugar and flour that some asshole has shoved a piece of rotten fruit into. Had anyone in the class existed from the waist down until that day? Miss Ryland had always asked us to take our seats, never to sit our butts down, never to park it. We had all been torsos hovering over our plastic chairs. Our whole lives we'd walked on our hands. Nobody in that class ever considered the smooth bumps of fat and muscle that you so callously split in half and poured in front of the whole class. Fargo, Miss Ryland said, though she was looking not at you, but the ceiling. That word is not allowed in this classroom or any classroom. What, raisin? You asked. You're the one who brought it up. I don't ever want to have to use the word again either. 2. Your sister farts paste, you said, combing the kelp over your freshly shaved head, which my parents warned me not to ask about. I don't have a sister, I said, checking the horseshoe crab for sand fleas. Then who's that girl, you asked, always hanging from your mother's waist like a short, screaming third leg? There was no girl that summer, or the summer before, or any summer that you and I were alive. And when I asked my mother about a sister, she would tell me the plots to reruns of The Brady Bunch, paying particular attention to the slumber party episode where Marcia is punished for drawing a picture of her teacher as a hippopotamus, though what she was really drawing was George Washington. And while everything gets sorted out in the end, it does seem that the whole world was out to keep Marcia from having her slumber party. I spent the next year believing that there was some sort of miscarriage and that you were like a kid in a Stephen King novel and your cancer had given you the power to see people who had already died or who were never quite born. But it turned out my father just didn't want to have any more children. And none of the powers you got from chemotherapy were very special. And maybe that's why you lived. All right, this next poem is based on a line by Barrent Lebrecht, who I'm pretty sure is in the room. Yeah, hey Barrent. Um, it's called Pretend You Are Here. I just went right by it. By the way, pro tip for people putting together their own books, always put your table of contents in alphabetical order instead of numerical order so that you are able to find your poems easily, because the poems just are in numerical order. That's the way the book works. All right, so this is called Pretend You Are Here. The computer stares at me like we are two ex-lovers at a party full of people that neither of us have ever liked. You know, a party. I've decided to accept my solitude like it is a friend who says vaguely homophobic things when they're sober, but sits on my lap when they're drunk. I've started giving out your phone number to people who seem nice, but not my type, which I worry means that my type isn't very nice. My blood type isn't very sweet. I taste like what I refuse to eat. You pretend you no longer play my phone number in the drunk X lottery, that you never turn to ask my advice, as if I wasn't the coldest shoulder you ever set your devil on. All right, I do have time for that poem that I cut, so I have two poems left. One is the only really old poem that I have, I have many very old poems. The only very old poem I will be reading. I'd kind of forgotten about it. I did a reading for my birthday this year in the pandemic, where I did Nighthawks at the Diner. There's a Tom Waits album that he recorded, but those songs don't exist anywhere else. So I wrote a whole show using all of the titles from Nighthawks at the Diner to write new poems. And my mom showed up for it and asked if it was okay if she read one of my favorite poems. My mom once asked if she could use one of my poems for a friend's funeral service when I was like 21, and she picked a poem that I'd written when I was 13 about nuclear holocaust. So I was worried when she said she was going to read one of my poems, but like she read a poem that I really like, and so this is that poem. It's called Barefoot Bay, 1984. At the end of the pier, three old men laughed, pulling in fish after fish after fish. They could not stop catching fish and laughing. My grandfather caught nothing but nerves. He threw back each one with a tiny curse word that he didn't think I'd be able to catch. I walked down to the pier, not for the fish, but for the laughter. But it was a fish one of the old men gave me. It was probably nothing dinner worthy, but I was 7, and the fish filled both hands like a closed mouth smile. I don't know where the pelican came from, other than, the sky. Its smile was open as a stranger, inches from my face, and laughing like he'd found me at the end of his hook. What could I offer such a smile but the fish and a terrified curse my grandfather pretended not to hear? Right, and this is the last one. Most of my poems come from projects, you've probably noticed. Between 2016 and 2018, I asked people to suggest poetry collections to me, and I would read them and I would write a poem in response to a poem from one of the poetry collections. They would be related in different ways: response poems, remixes, me just using the title as a prompt. It differed. And this was after a friend suggested the autobiography of Red by Anne Carson, which will come up in this poem. Again, this is the last poem, and it's called Or Anything. Either poetry can change your life, or it cannot. Heather suggests to Dean that he should read Anne Carson's autobiography of Red with the same tame words that I recommend: should, enjoy, narrative, story, sexuality, island, family, volcano, red. all these gentle things that flow towards you at a pace that, when compared to the way work and relationships are constantly crashing you against the surprisingly giving rocks of your everyday, seem reasonable. When the book is returned with no new pages folded or creases on the cover, Heather asks how Dean enjoyed it. Dean says, it was okay. Didn't change my life or anything. Things that have changed my life are not the death and everyday unfairness of the current police state, but a free granola bar from someone who doesn't want me to adapt to their religious belief, or a train that shows up when expected, or poetry. Every poetry changes my life in some way, even grandmother poems detailing which flowers represent which flavor of grief. Heather, because I am speechless, says, changing your life is a pretty high bar for a poetry collection. I just meant, did you like it? Of course, I love the man who suggested I read Autobiography of Red, but not a manuscript full of unrequited lust way. When we met, I confused his native origin for his sexuality, being Scandinavian and being queer being similar mosaics when being squinted at through LSD. The confusion lasted less than an hour, but reached the bar of changing my life. Odin and I met, of course, through poetry. As Heather and I met through poetry, as Dean and I met through poetry, as Heather and Dean met through poetry, what is life but a series of friendships forged by an art you sometimes hate? Dean shrugs. A drunk, also student, asked Odin what language people speak in Iceland. Icelandic, he said. Right, said the drunk, and I speak Americanish. Do you speak German or Dutch? What does it take besides a common language to change a life? In Autobiography of Red, a dragonish boy falls in love with an older boy whose love destroys him, which is a modernization of one of the labors of Heracles, which is also every relationship I've ever had. Except that sometimes I am Dragon Boy Graydon, sometimes I am Heracles, but most often I am merely the cattle or the dog destroyed trivially so that Heracles can get at his actual target. No character in a tragedy deserves more sympathy than any other character. Everyone in the tragedy has been deliberately placed in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person so that misery or jealousy or a volcano of misunderstanding can wipe out the victims and let the survivors suffer their continued existence. Tragedy is a form of poetry. Poetry is a thing that constantly changes lives, or poetry is a form of living that's in a constant state of tragedy, or some Tuesday you will be in a car blasting Paul's Boutique, eating soft pretzels with someone you care about. One of you will probably die before the other one. Is all this singing and driving worth the eventual grief? Of course it is. What's wrong with you? But where does the red come in? My hair when I was younger and more certain that what I wrote would never hurt anyone? The fire engine I thought I could grow up becoming? The impending middle-aged convertible that might loom had I not surrendered driving so I could live in a city with an art I barely recognize, people constantly leaving, and something as trite as anger? The train I take to work is red. Does that count? Heather asked me if the autobiography of Red changed my life. Of course it has. But how can I put it in the kind of words that will change hers or Dean's? I shrug. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Matt, and thanks, Gina, for putting this together.
Thank you so much, Adam. Thank you for being here tonight in this strange way of silence on your end between poems. It's very loud here because I was clapping, but you know. As a reminder, there will be questions and answers. You can either ask them out loud or put them in chat. There will be a writing workshop tomorrow night starting at the same time, running from 7:30 to 9 Central, led by Adam. It will be amazing, and you will write the greatest poem ever.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. I'll start things off just with a quick question. The poem about being in the coma and all and relearning language, I just absolutely adore the language you used and the role of it. Can you tell us a little bit about just the writing of that poem?
Yeah, I basically was trying to kind of sort things out just using basic language. I came up with a stones, rocks, pebbles idea, and that sort of caused me to rewrite the rest of the poem. and kind of figure out where that journey was. I didn't actually lose the ability to speak. I just had a very difficult time understanding things and putting together not a proper sentence. I could put a sentence together. Whether it was related to the question you asked was up for grabs. But I wanted it to also have the feel of monotony because I was having the same conversations over and over with everyone in the neighborhood. And there were a series of people in the neighborhood who had memory issues. So I was also having the same discussions over and over again with the same people, none of whom I'd ever met before. So,
man, well, it was just fantastic. I think it
Thank you.
really carried through like an altered kind of state of language and figuring things out. It was beautifully done.
Thank you.
Other questions? What do you folks want to know? Gina.
Adam, I would love to know if there is going to be an opportunity at your writing workshop for a poem called In Defense of Raisins.
Absolutely. My thing is that I work in a comic book store, which is generally known for judgmental staff members who tell you what you should like and what you shouldn't like. And I've never been that person. Like, I am in a very serious relationship with someone who several times a week eats cinnamon raisin bagels first thing in the morning, and it's not caused any tension between us. Everything's fine. So please bring your raisin tribute poems. I would love to hear them. I just will not be eating any raisins while you are reading them.
I accept that. I love it. Thank you so much for that poem and that line.
Thank you.
Who else? What do you want to know? Oh, Celine.
I want to know, well, I admire the fact that you are able to, like, you know, take not examples, but you listen to these poems or you read these poems and then you can gather ideas from those poems and create something completely original. I think nowadays that's hard for people to do and not almost like mimic the same thing that the other person said. So I guess my question is, how do you do that? How are you able to take, but not necessarily take too much, the perfect balance? And has that been a struggle?
It is a struggle. Like, often my first drafts are not what I want them to be because they sound too much like the author's work or the poem. It helped that at least in 2016, I'd made a schedule and other people were also writing poems, and I got to see how they were dealing with, like, oh, this person is writing a response this way. That can I do that without stealing either their voice or the text of the original poem? And it also helped that I was reading like so many poets during that time that I didn't have time to just absorb like one writer's way of thinking and writing. Like, there was still so much other stuff coming in that I almost couldn't fully mimic someone's style unless I like really sat down and focused on it, which I didn't want to do, obviously.
Yeah. That's smart. That's a tip for the classroom with students too.
I have actually a book called Tips from the Bar. Wait, I'm moving my head the wrong way. It's here. And I'll be doing some stuff. It's a prompt book. I used to be the bartender for the Cantab Poetry Slam scene for a number of years, and the last 11 years before the Cantab closed because of the pandemic, I would give a weekly prompt. So yeah, I forgot why oh, you said tips in the classroom is what inspired that.
You are a jack of all trades.
I'm trying. Comic books, and it's weird being a bartender who doesn't drink anymore, but I haven't had to bartend since I stopped drinking, so I don't know if I still have any of the skills.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Celine.
Other questions? Well, people round up a question. One question I have is, I know you do a lot of reading and requests, you know, book titles and stuff. Who has surprised you in the last couple of months? Has there been a book or a poet that you're like, that we should know about?
I want to make sure I'm pronouncing his name right. Gabriel Ojeda Segwe, I believe. The book is called Jazzercise as a Language. And it's a fantastic manuscript. It is one long poem, but it's split up page by page, and the format changes over the course of the book, so it doesn't feel like you're reading the same thing over and over again. But it's all either in response to watching 1980s jazzercise tapes, or like his experiences with gender because of his experiences with jazzercise, and it's 100% brilliant. One of the best things I've read all year. And I did the Seeley Challenge this year, and that was 31 books just in the month of August. So I've read a lot, which is good, because that's, without it, I never would have read Gabrielle's book. Like, I was just going through an independent bookstore's recommendations, and I was like, jazzercise is a language? Sure. And it was wonderful.
Wow. All right. I'm not going to suggest people shop at Amazon or not shop at Amazon, but if you want to find this book, it is, I put it in the chat at the Amazon link, and you can find it wherever you buy your books.
There's also, it's from Nebraska, the collection of African poets.
Yeah.
Every book that I've bought from that collection, I originally bought it because of Safia El Hillo, who I've heard and loved, but I've since bought probably 6 or 7 of those books, and they have all been amazing, and none of them are quite like the other ones.
Have you read Sadiq Zukogi?
I bought it today. I haven't read it yet.
He's one of our teaching artists, so.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and he's pretty amazing. I follow him on Facebook, and I'm constantly jealous. So.
Okay. Yeah, no, I today, for the first time in a while, I went and got a chance to stop at a bookstore on my way home from work, and I bought 5 or 6 books, and that was one of them, purely because it was part of that series, and it's been so great. Yeah,
it's a fantastic series. Everyone should look it up. University of Nebraska Press, I believe. So. All right. What else do you want to know? What questions do you have, fine people?
I promise I have answers, and I'm not judgmental in that way. I am judgmental about things, but not about questions.
Yeah. Well, tell us, what is something good that's come in your poetry life because of the pandemic? I
host a Saturday night Zoom series, and some nights people read their own work, but often what happens is during the week, you get to know a theme several weeks, months in advance. People write poems for the theme, they send them to me, and then I send them out to other people to read. So you get to hear your poem read by someone else. And then there's sometimes, you have to try and guess, people in the room will try and guess who wrote it. I don't tell the person receiving the text who sent it in. So it's been wonderful. Yeah, Barrett is there. There's probably, I think we have between 18 to 25 readers a week.
Wow.
And it's been fantastic. So, and we would love for more people to show up. It is a varied group as far as backgrounds and locations. It started off being fairly Boston based, but it has spread out.
Cool. And how do people find it?
Facebook friending me is the easiest way, because I do post about it and I'm happy to invite people. It's a Facebook group called the Saturday Night Themed Readings. So if you just look that up on Facebook and request an invitation to the group, I will look and see that, oh, this person is a poet, and I will accept you. So try not to have your profile just being about, I don't know, chainsaw sales or something, unless it's very poetic chainsaw sales.
Awesome.